Welcome and thank you for joining my painting community. My name's Daniel Edmondson. It takes about 10 minutes for the whole email machine to process your name and send out to you the email with the 7 tips for you to download. And you're going to love it because it covers a lot of really good stuff. Also, there's a download for a checklist for good quality gallery paintings, so make sure you download that as well. It's probably even better than the 7 tips handout. While you wait, I have a short video that's jam-packed with 5 really good painting tips, as well as explaining my story of how I went about coming up with my different processes and methods, like the Sherlock method, my 4X drawing method for painters, and my magnetic composition method, and how I went about coming up with those things to make painting even simpler and easier to grasp.
When I took classes a long time ago, and I did tons of workshops, I found that what was really happening is the art teachers were either coming around and correcting drawing or telling me these little things, but they weren't really teaching me anything about art at all. It was all about the shoulders too high, the this is too dark, or this needs to be darker. Instead, they didn't talk about color theory in terms of how it applies to paint, and color harmonies, and value structure, and how to actually physically apply the paint. And I don't know whether or not they did this deliberately because they don't want to give out their secrets, or if it was just they're not good communicators. And it doesn't really even matter. What happened was, though, I discovered that it wasn't working for me, and painting seemed very difficult for me to get. And what happened was, I was in a class one time, and an instructor said, "Don't ask me why, just do this." And I think that was the moment that something happened in my brain and a switch flipped, and I realized what I wanted was to know the why of everything in painting. Because if I understood the why, then I could put it all together, and painting wouldn't be that hard, right? So that was that moment that it switched for me, and then I developed this system where I would break everything down to its simplest elements, and then I could understand it. My painting just took off like crazy like that right after that. And then later, of course, I've taught it to my students, and they're like, "Oh, wow, this is just information I've never heard before. I've always heard your shoulder's too high or this is too dark," rather than the actual fundamentals of painting. And that's what I've tried to give and share with my students. And let me tell you, the very first discovery I made was that when I broke everything down to it's just the basic elements of art, that I found out that there was not a right way and a wrong way to do art. There's just art, right? Because if you look at Rembrandt, and you look at Alice Neal, and you look at Jackson Pollock, and you look at Grandma Moses, and all these other painters through time, right? There is no one way that if you took all of their art and put it together, you could come up with one cohesive way of saying, this is the rules for art. So, here's the big tip. You're going to love this. If there's no one way, or if there's no right way to paint, then really you don't learn how to paint. You learn how to paint the way you want to paint, if that makes sense to you. So that and all these rules that you've always heard, don't put everything in the center, don't paint 2 objects, always paint 3, or odd versus even. All these kind of rules kind of go out the door, because those rules are only have any kind of foundation or truth in them for a specific way that you want to paint, right? So if you want to paint a particular way, most of the rules aren't going to apply. So really what you need to do is almost discard the rules if you can, and just paint going forward the way that you want to paint, and accept only a few guidelines, no rules, guidelines as to what the best way to paint for the way you want to go forward. Okay? And really, I think that that was a huge freeing thing for me to do, because then all these rules that seemingly contradicted each other, and which made learning art hard, they all evaporated and went out the door. So we no longer had to focus on that. Instead, I could focus on painting. And really, that's what it's all about anyways, having fun, creating beautiful things while we paint. What I did was I broke these I took these concepts and I broke them down, right? And my art, it got better. And then later, of course, people asked me to teach, and so I taught. And my students got better, and they really enjoyed it. And I only had a small area in my studio, so I could have a few students. So some of them suggested I make DVDs, right? And I didn't know anything about making DVDs, but I agreed to do it. And at first I just made them for a few friends and students, that wanted them. And then later other people wanted them, and just kind of like spiraled into this thing where a lot of people wanted them. And if I would have made them better if I would have known I was going to make them for hundreds of people, but I'm an artist, not a videographer, so I just did the best I could. So anyway, what I did is I created this set of 10 starter DVDs, and later I created a landscape course too. But what I did was I tried to share with you in these DVDs not only how to paint and demos and all that, but also the why as to why you do everything, and what creates movement in painting, what creates advancing and receding planes, what's background information, what's foreground information, and that kind of stuff, rather than saying, hey, your shoulder's too high and the drawing is off, or your value is not quite right, it's too dark. Instead, if you have an understanding of what value structure is, and what's even more important is structural unity in your painting, then all that just instantly makes sense, and you don't have to worry so much about the value structure, the values in the painting being light or dark, because if you understand structural unity, it automatically takes care of all that. So I made these videos. The information that you get in the videos, you won't get anywhere else. And the thing is, I really wanted to understand it, and when I was first doing this, I really felt this frustration, like I'm not getting it. The other people have got paintings in galleries, and their paintings look good. Why is it that I'm not getting it? And then finally I did this thing, and I broke it down to where I really could understand it, and I developed my system, if you will, for lack of a better word. And then it was starting to click. And I wanted to get into galleries, and I wanted to have my friends and family notice, hey, he's getting better. And I felt like kind of like an idiot, like they were thinking, well, this guy's just been painting all this time, he's not getting any better. And then finally it all clicked for me once I broke it down into the basic elements, and then I got better and better and better, and I felt happy, and I felt like if I had never done that, I never would have got better. And I want to tell you probably the one thing that I think was the best thing I ever learned. I'm going to tell it to you right now. And that was these 3 elements that I was missing in my painting, and I find most people are missing in theirs. In fact, I made a little phrase called PIBAMP about it. And it stands for preserve integrity of brushwork, be authoritative, and use more paint. These were the 3 things that I felt that I was missing, and I think that most people are probably missing in their art. And first is be authoritative, or preserve integrity of brushstrokes. So when you're sitting there and you're painting, right, you need to make a stroke, leave it alone. Don't sit there and go over it and over and over and over and over while you're waiting to figure out what to do next. You make a stroke, make another stroke. And then be authoritative, so that when you make a stroke, it's like very deliberate, so you're not sitting there thinking, oh, should I do this? Instead, it's better to do it with confidence, even if it's wrong, than it is to do it correctly and be very timid about it. And then lastly, quite frankly, most people just don't use enough paint, including me. I was having these paintings that look like colored canvases instead of like paintings. So when I found out that I used more paint, not only did the paint look fresher because it had that look, but also I no longer had what looked like a colored canvas. Instead, it looked like this rich painting with brushstrokes and full of life and vitality. That was the best thing I learned. So anyway, really, it's just not your fault, all right? And everything just wasn't told to you, either because we have all these artificial rules that are made up, or maybe they just deliberately weren't telling us, or they just didn't know how to communicate it. And I feel like we're just the lost children of art. We're like this little band that want to get better at art, but we just never could because we just frankly didn't have the information. And there's a few lucky few who either had really good teachers who would lead them by the hand through this process and until they got it right, or that they were lucky enough to be able to figure out how to break it down themselves and then got better. And I think I have removed that barrier, certainly for me, and I felt like painting became much easier and funner for me after I broke through that barrier and was able to simplify it down. And I've hopefully done that in my set of videos so that you can understand it and understand the fundamentals and understand whys behind what you do, everything, and get us through to where painting becomes more effortless. When I first got into galleries, I had no money, right? And I was really excited to get into galleries because I finally got into galleries, and that was finally something that I had waited a long time for. And once I understood art, it was, I finally created paintings that were good enough to get in galleries, right? But I didn't know anything about how to make frames, or I didn't have good frames, right? And they were too expensive. When I was first getting into galleries, I barely had 2 nickels to rub together. So what I did was I decided I was going to learn how to make frames. So I went everywhere. I asked people. I tried to get information from books and just could not find the information to make frames, right? And I thought, well, I really I don't want to put hobby type store frames on my paintings. So what I did is I decided I'd splurge and get a program and make that leap of faith. And I was freaked out because I didn't want to get ripped off. I thought, well, what's this going to be like? And I didn't want to look like an idiot to my wife, who's thinking I'm a dreamer anyway, for thinking I can go make frames. I didn't know anything about making frames, but I figured, well, what the heck, So I took the plunge, and I got they were back on VHS tapes back. This how long it's been, and I got this program, and sure enough, it led me step by step all the way through this frame making process, and I was able to make great frames. And then all the people I was worried about thinking that I was going to look like an idiot to, like all my friends and other artists, next thing you know, they wanted me to make frames for them. Then eventually, I went on to make a framing business, and I had a framing business for a while until it just got to be too much for me to handle and interfered with my painting too much. But it was a funny thing how I was so worried and freaked out that everyone was going to be ripping me off, and that it was going to be a program that wasn't going to be appropriate, but it turned out to be great. And I really got a lot out of it. And now if you look at my website, every frame you see on my website is a frame that I've made myself. Because I just love to be able to make my own frames. That way I can match the painting to the frame. So really, anyway, the secret for lack of a better word, it's not really a secret, is that we need to break it down to its core elements and the basic information about what it is, the principles behind painting in the simplest form, so we can really understand it. And I don't want these to stay secrets. I want them to get out there, because the system of art teaching that we have now, where we have all these rules that don't really apply, and then the rules only apply to this technique and not to that technique, but we don't know that when we're first starting out. And this is really what's hurting artists and keeping them down. Instead, I want artists to grow. And I think if everyone could have a good understanding of art, imagine how we could elevate art, because people will be starting from a new level, and then we can go up, and who knows what we can do with art, right? And when you learn this, you'll become one of the members of this community, right? That helps to break up this false way of thinking about it, and we can spread the word and become a teacher. I want all my people that take my classes to go on to become teachers and teach, the same thing, and plus whatever they can add to it to bring art to a complete new level, and we can change the way art education is done, right? What I've been telling you, I think if you understand my ideas of breaking it down to the simplest forms, I think if you like that, you'll like the DVDs, right? And let me tell you a little bit about what the DVDs are and what they aren't. What they aren't is a bunch of theory that is based on one idea of what art is supposed to be like, right? And they're not a bunch of boring lectures about me painting and going through the process and talking the whole time and explaining the whys behind what I do at every turn, right? Or at least I try to, And it's just a set of 10 DVDs. So what you get is 10 DVDs for 10 separate paintings, right? and along with those DVDs, you get pictures of what I'm painting, so you can either print them out or put them up on your computer monitor and work from your monitor at the same time you're watching the DVDs. And then you get to send in the paintings for critiques, just as if it was in an actual workshop. I look at them and I'll send you back an audio file or a video file usually of what I see in your painting, and just give you some real quick tips on what you could do to maybe make it better. And the 10 DVDs, they're pretty inexpensive. They're less than $20 a piece. I think 17 something a piece. And I mean, that you spend more on that on lattes each week. A lot of people do. So, if that sounds like something that you might be interested, go down below and get the set, and let's get started and have some fun, become a great artist, change the world. Thanks.